Hi Tom, great session on the wedges yesterday. Just a quick recap on the points that we discussed. Two main issues are using the bounce more effectively or maintaining the loft. You tend to de-loft the golf club quite a bit. There tends to be a little reroute of the swing plane on occasion that can lead to low point control issues. And more importantly, we struggle with controlling ball speed. We get too many shots that come off fast, carry the distance that we want the shot to finish, and then release up the green too far, maybe 15 feet beyond. So you want to spend a little bit of time when you're playing, shallowing things out, learning to maintain the loft and start to control that ball speed a little bit. First and foremost, the use of the bounce is limited largely because of the way we take the club back. We take the club back in quite a steep manner. This is earlier in the season, but sort of demonstrates nicely your progression between when we started yesterday and when we finished. So club comes up very quick. We've got two options from there. We can either come back down along those lines like we did on this one. So club still quite well above the plane line, toe end of the club downwards, club face very square, if not slightly shut to the arc, leading edge exposed to the ground. You can see the divot coming up, which is fine. I mean, it's not the be all and end all, but we want to be better suited. We want you more comfortable with using the bounce, more comfortable with presenting the club face with more loft, and more comfortable shallowing that swing out. So that's one scenario. The other scenario is that we go back steep, then shallow it out. Problem we have there is in transition, the right shoulder will start to drop behind you, which in turn will move the low point back, prevent that turn continuing through the hit like you did on that shot. And that's where you get that sort of potential to hit it heavy, or we keep the shaft lean, pull the club out of the ground too fast, and we start to scull it. So that was what this session was about shallowing out the takeaway, maintaining the loft on the golf club, etc. throughout. I'm just going to take you back to when the shaft's parallel with the ground in the backswing so that we can do some comparisons. Pretty straightforward drill. We hit some 56 degree wedge shots to a target that was about 30-35 yards away from us. Once we got the idea of what trajectory we're creating, I asked you to create that same flight using a 9-iron, and then I just left you to it. You sort of knew what to do. You just need to become more familiar with the feels and more comfortable with the action. So we can see here the takeaway. We've lowered the hands a little bit. As you open the club face, you drop the handle to realign the loft towards the target. As you take the club back now, the club stays much lower to the ground. And you can see that because you're in a position now where you haven't got sufficient loft to play the ideal shot, you've got to create that loft, and then you've got to maintain that loft. So you can see the leading edge of the club is in a totally different condition relative to the arc when we arrive at shaft parallel during the takeaway. So club face very open at setup, maintaining that relationship throughout the backswing. As that swing progresses, everything about it is much shallower. As we then come down, club out in front of the hands, toe end slightly down. Shaft shallows much nicer. Club doesn't get as far out in front of the hands, and is certainly the club face is being held open through the hit. You can see the back of the club engaging the ground on that one. Very shallow, resulting in you creating the trajectory that we want with a club ill-suited to the task. And really for you, this is where it's at. We want to practice in a manner that puts you in a position where you have to maintain the loft, where you have to create a shallower angle of attack, where you have to engage the bounce as a result of that, so that you can get comfortable with it during your practice. This is all about familiarity, getting used to the feels, getting used to the scenario. You can see the launch on those two shots, very, very similar, even though one club has got substantially less loft on it than the other. It's not about the loft we pull out the bag, it's about the loft we're presenting at impact. If we're forever de-lofting the golf club, as you see when we look at the face-on footage shortly, if we're always taking loft off it, we're exposing the leading edge, we're never using the bounce, so we're never going to be shallow enough. But we're also going to hit higher up on the club face, which is going to result in the ball coming off quicker and the ball coming off with less spin. So again, it's not conducive to superior wedge play. So keep working on shallowing things out with the less lofted club, creating the trajectory that we want, so that we can present better loft to the club at impact and create a little bit less shaft lean. We're starting to see a nice change here based on previous sessions that we've had, where the shaft doesn't lean forward as much as it used to. As you come through the golf ball, the flex in the left knee doesn't increase as much as it used to, and the rate of closure and the rate at which the club passes the hands isn't as excessive as it used to be. So steep, leading edge, de-lofting the wedge, not something that you have difficulty with. Playing that sort of shallower shot where you want to maintain loft, engage the bounce, get the club overtaking the hands, is a shot that you can play, but as discussed, it's not a shot that you own enough to sort of trust under pressure, and it's going to be a key contributing factor to your ability to win things next year. If you can tidy that wedge game up, you stand a good chance of winning some big events. That's the area now that you've got. It's not that you can't do it, you've just got to become more comfortable doing it when you're under the gun. Just a quick look at the two swings at the start, where we were steep, club face hooded, and this is towards the end, after an hour or so of hitting some 9-iron shots. Nice change in the takeaway. Much shallower halfway back. Less of a need to reroute the golf club. More loft on the club face coming into impacts. We've got a leading edge, very much toe down. Leading edge, more toe up. So this is the same club, 56 degrees. Coming into the golf ball a little bit shallower, and able to maintain the loft through the hit rather than de-loft it. Have a great break, get some practicing over the Christmas period, and I look forward to doing some further work with you in 2016 and getting some more games together. Well done.